Hello everyone, this is Jesse Phillips from Waypoint Technology Group. Today's Tech Tip video is concerning UHF radio-based RTK surveys. We're going to go over the base rover setup. A couple of things that you'll need are two Trimble GNSS receivers with internal radios, one with the ability to broadcast or transmit UHF radio corrections. And this is an option on some R8s, but it's standard with the R10s and R12s. You'll also definitely need a Trimble data collector running Trimble Access version 2018 or newer. So in today's video, we're just going to be using two receivers and their internal radios. An external radio like the TDL 450 is something you might want to add on in certain scenarios, just to increase that distance between the base and the rover. But today we're just going to use the internal radios of the two receivers. So first we're going to establish a Bluetooth connection to both the base and the receiver. So you're going to want to go to Connections in Trimble Access. I'm going to go to the Bluetooth tab under Corrections. And you see where it says Connect to GNSS Rover, and on the right, Connect to GNSS Base. So the first step is to search for receivers. So make sure you have both of your receivers powered on. You see I already have two devices paired, the R12 and the R12i, but if you don't have them paired, they'll be in the Discover Devices column. And you can just highlight the receiver and click Pair, and then add it as a rover or base. The most important thing is in this screen, you want to make sure your GNSS base is in that column is the correct receiver or the correct serial number that you're using as a base. And then in the rover column, I have the R12i here. You want to make sure that is the correct serial number as well. Depending on what two receivers you have, if they are different models, like in this case, I have an R12 and an R12i, I definitely would want to use the better one, the newer one, the R12i as the rover. You'll get a lot more out of the setup this way. So after you have paired both of your devices, you hit accept. Then you're going to want to go to Instrument GNSS Functions and click that base mode button. This will force your data collector to connect to the base, in my case the R12. So once I see that little tripod with the receiver on top of it at the top of my screen, that means I'm connected to a base receiver. So next step is I'd want to go to the Settings and Survey Styles menu in Trimble Access, and I'd want to create a new survey style. We're going to pay particular attention to the big three, as my colleague likes to call them: the broadcast format, the radio frequency, and the baud rate or bit rate. One thing we want to emphasize too is there are certain things that are important we set correctly in the survey style, but the radio settings themselves actually reside on the receivers, not the survey style. So we'll create that new survey style, base rover we'll call it. It's going to be a GNSS survey type. We'll start with base options. For survey type, we're going to want to go with RTK. There's also RTK in infill or RTK in logging. These are options. If you want to log data at the base, you can use either of these methods. So you'll have raw data to post-process a more accurate base position if this is needed on the back end of your survey. So we want to pay attention to the broadcast format. That's one of the big three. We're going to go with CMRX. Pick your antenna type. In my case, my base is an R12, so I'll pick R12 internal. The measure to, it depends on if you're setting up on a tripod or a rod. If you're setting up on a tripod, you'll probably use this lever of R10 extension, which is what I'll pick here. I'll leave the antenna height blank, just so it prompts me to measure it each time. The serial number is not necessary to enter. The station index is an important one though. You'd want to set the station index, and you can choose whatever number you like here between 0 and 31. I'm going to go with 21. I'm going to set the same number on my rover options. This will just ensure that when I'm running this base and rover in this survey, my rover is definitely getting corrections from my base over the frequency that I set and not somebody else's base. The elevation mass, we can leave at 10. As far as the signal tracking, you'll want to set what your receiver can track. I know the R12 can track all these, so I'll hit accept. Next, we'll want to go to base data link. Ensure it says type radio and then radio is set to receiver internal. Then we'll hit connect, and since we're connected by Bluetooth to the base, it'll connect to the internal radio. We'll set the radio operating mode to base, because this is the base. Before we look at these frequencies, I do want to emphasize there's numerous frequencies that you can choose from, but they're not something that comes stock on a receiver. The frequencies are something that needs to be programmed by your Trimble vendor. The radio frequency, that's another one of the big three that we want to pay attention to. Whatever we set this frequency to, we want to make sure we're matching it on the Rover radio. So I'm going to go with 461.025. The baud rate or the bit rate, that's another one of the big three, the last of the three that we want to definitely pay attention to. Is also something that needs to be matching between the base and the receiver. So I'm going to go with the TrimTalk version 1 at 8,000 bits per second. Basically, the higher this number, the faster the information is being transferred. I'm not going to use any repeaters, so I'll leave that to none. Leave channel sharing to none. Enable station ID, this is where you put your call sign for using a radio, but really isn't necessary for these internal radios, but definitely necessary if you're using an external radio like a TDL 450, a stronger radio. And we're going to do a transmit power level of 2 watts. So I'll hit accept. So next we're going to want to go to Rover options in our survey style list there. We're going to ensure the survey type is RTK, the broadcast format matches. It's also set to CMRX. I'm going to pick the R12i internal. That's my Rover. I'm measuring the bottom of quick release. I'm on a fixed height rod of 2 meters, so I can enter that. Serial number is not necessary. The R12i does have the IMU, the e-bubble, so I can leave those checked if I want. Here's the station index that I was referencing earlier. So we set our station index to 21 on the base, and we're going to match this to 21. To make sure I'm only getting corrections from my base and not someone else's who may be running on the same frequency as I am. Problem station index isn't necessary unless you have multiple bases set up yourself, and then you could actually have a prompt come up. Maybe you have one set as 21, one is 22, so you can enter what base you want to receive corrections from. But in this style that we're setting up today, it's not necessary. If we just have one base, one Rover. So we can uncheck that. We'll leave satellite differential to off. Elevation mask and PDOP are fine. Check the signals that your receiver tracks. Auto tolerance we can leave on. The exfil button on the Rover I would uncheck, just because the way exfil works, if you lose connections to your base, there's a geostationary satellite over North America that can provide you with corrections. So even if you lose connection to the base, you'll still get a fixed position, but your vertical will not be as accurate. It could lead to some vertical issues. Definitely not as accurate as connecting up to your local base. So we'll leave that unchecked to maybe avoid some elevation issues. So we'll hit accept, and next we'll go to Rover data link. But you remember we're still connected to Bluetooth to our base receiver, so we're going to have to connect to our Rover receiver. So once we go to Rover data link, the little button at the bottom with like a right arrow that says Rover, you can click that button to force the Bluetooth to connect to your Rover instead of your base. If that doesn't work, you can go back to the instrument functions and click the Rover mode button there, and that should force it to connect to the Rover as well. Once you are in fact connected to your Rover and not your base, you should see the Rover icon at the top instead of the tripod with the receiver on it. So once again, the type is radio. That's how the Rover will be receiving corrections via radio. And the radio it's going to be using is its internal radio. So receiver internal. Click connect at the bottom. Trimble Access will connect to the internal radio of the Rover. We're going to make sure the radio operating mode is Rover. And we'll set the frequency to the same that we had the base set to, 461.025. And the radio mode to TrimTalk version 1 at 8,000 bits per second. So make sure those match. Click accept. After making all those edits to base options, base data link, Rover options, Rover data link, make sure you hit store before leaving the survey style screen, and then you should be all set to try out your new survey style. Connect to your base via Bluetooth. Once you're connected, you can go to measure and then choose that base Rover survey style and then start base receiver. Once you have your base going, you can switch your Bluetooth connection to your Rover and go back to that same survey style and hit measure points. You should be good to go for a simple UHF radio RTK survey, base and Rover. In the future, I plan on doing tech tip videos about a similar setup, but using cell-based corrections instead of radio-based, and maybe one on the TDL 450 as well. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is Jesse Phillips from Waypoint Technology. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments at waypointtech.freshdesk.com. Thanks a lot, guys.